Welcome, YouTubers. Today we are going over a Commander deck tech for Raff Capashen, ship's Mage. He is a blue-white legendary creature, human wizard with flash, flying, and a power toughness of 3/3. He also has, you may cast historic spells as though they had flash, and that is really summing up the deck today. Flash. The goal of this deck is always to be playing on our opponent's turn. It's always to have a response. We will control the deck with counter spells or removal, and advance our board state by playing our spells when our opponents do not expect us to. Now that we have a game plan, we need mana to accomplish it. Azorius doesn't have the best land ramp. White is getting better, but we're leaning heavily onto mana rocks and artifact ramp, with format staples of Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Fellwar Stone. Oftentimes you'll be playing against a blue or white deck, so Fellwar Stone will tap for blue or white most of the time. We also have more mana rocks to help with mana fixing, like Gilded Lotus, 5 mana, taps for 3 of any color, Talisman of Progress, and Azorius Signet for mana fixing. Then we have the mana rocks with a bit more utility. We have Thought Vessel, which allows us to have no max hand size. Does tap for a colorless though. Mind Stone and Commander's Sphere, can be sacrificed to draw a card if we are confident in having mana enough, or we can sack it in a pinch to draw a card. We also have some actual land wrap in this deck, with Solemn Simulacrum and Burnished Heart being creatures that, when they die, Solemn Simulacrum, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. It's an amazing commander card. Burnished Heart's a bit more restricted, seeing as how we have to pay 3 and sacrifice it, but we do get 2 lands from it. And Archaeomancer's Map searches basic planes into your hand, then he allows you to put lands into play when an opponent who has more than you has another enter the battlefield under their control. So we have some non-ramp pieces that are pretty similar to ramp, or at least help you maintain mana. Reality Chip allows you to play a land off the top of your library if it is equipped to a creature. Jor's Familiar lowers the casting cost of historic spells, which is most of the deck. Night of Hidden Coves lowers the casting cost of spells when it's not your turn, which is essentially what we're trying to do, cast historic spells on other turns. And Ornithopter of Paradise is a flying mana dork. It's perfect. It can block, it can tap for mana, it's a flyer. Oftentimes it prevents you from taking combat damage early. So now that we have the game plan of playing stuff on everybody's turn and the mana to accomplish it, we need to keep drawing so we can keep casting spells. Esper Sentinel, Mangara the Diplomat, and Nezahal Primal Tide are all conditional draw dependent on opponent's actions. Esper Sentinel, if you get it out early, it's game breaking. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Mangara, it's whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more are attacking you or a planeswalker you control, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. Really shuts down Spellslinger strategies, or, doesn't shut them down, but it rewards you, helps you keep up with them. And it also helps you keep up if you're being hit with a token strategy. Nezahal, whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. It's more expensive than Esper Sentinel, so it doesn't have the downside of only once per turn. And then we have some bigger card draw, which is more consistent and activated by us rather than dependent on our opponent's actions. We have Sphinx's Revelation, an X spell, X white, blue, blue, instant. You gain X life and draw X cards, so it has the added benefit of gaining us life. Arcanus the Omnipotent, 3 blue, blue, blue for a 3/4, and you tap it to draw 3 cards. So if you play it on the end step before your turn, or play it as a blocker with Historic Flash, as long as our commander's out, it will be non-summoning sick by our turn, so we can always tap it It also can protect itself by paying 2 blue and returning it to hand. Gadwick the Wizened is a big card draw X spell on a creature, and it has the added benefit of protecting our board state a little, protecting us as well, by tapping target non-land permanent and opponent controls when you cast a blue spell. It just doubles down and fits perfectly in this deck. So we have the card draw that rewards us for playing stuff on other people's turns with Ephara and Wavebreak Hippocamp. So Ephara is once per turn, as is Wavebreak Hippocamp. Ephara is beginning of each upkeep. If you had another creature enter the battlefield under your control last turn, draw a card. So that is, I believe, only once per turn. And Wavebreak Hippocamp is whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. It's very easy to get a full rotation of card draw off Wavebreak Hippocamp or Ephara. Robe of the Archmagi is a 2 and a blue artifact equipment that has equip Shaman, Warlock, or Wizard 1. And our commander is a wizard, so we only have to pay 1 to equip it onto our commander. He's also flying, so we can easily get that combat damage in. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw that many cards. It's just phenomenal card draw. It is perfect, it's everything we need, and oftentimes we will be swinging with our commander against decks that don't have flying or reach. Teferi's Ageless Insight doubles card draw that wasn't from our draw step. It was a consideration for the most valuable card in the deck. Most important card for the deck. Now we have some more situational card draw. Padim, Console of Innovation, allows card draw when we have the highest CMC artifact, which isn't always going to be the case, but when we do, it's nice. He still has the added benefit of giving our artifacts hexproof. Artificer's Assistant isn't card draw specifically, but scrying whenever you cast a historic spell is very valuable because it can help manipulate the top of our deck. Weatherlight allows filtering the top 5 cards of our library to find a historic card. That is only on combat damage from Weatherlight, but it is still important and still usable. So now that we have card draw, mana rocks, and the game plan, we need to protect our board so we can keep advancing that game plan. And the easiest way in blue to protect the board is with counter spells. Lots of counter spells. There's a couple destruction and exile effects, but counter spells to the moon. With expensive ones like Mana Drain and Fierce Guardianship. Rewind and Unwind are perfect for this deck because we can counter a spell and then get our mana, untap our lands, so that we can then cast another spell. So now we have the white protection. Path to Exile and Swords of Plowshares are 1 white mana each to exile target creature. The opponent does get a slight benefit from it, but it's so much worth it for us to do. Generous Gift destroys rather than exiles, and its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant creature token, but it's not restricted to just creatures. We're going to continue protecting our board. Padim, like I said earlier, gives your artifacts hexproof, which is very invaluable, protecting your mana rocks. Cyclonic Rift is a commander all-star. It just protects our board by preventing opponents from having a board state at all. It's a one-sided board wipe. Everybody should know it. Everybody plays it. You bounce every permanent that's not on your board, that's non-land, for 7 mana. Teferi's Protection avoids board wipes for lethal damage. It's great for protecting not only our board state, but us. Now we have some more removal. Elspeth Conquers Death is 3 white for a Saga, which we can play instant speed because it's a historic spell. The first mode, exile target permanent and opponent controls with CMC 3 or greater, is really great for flashing out and destroying somebody's commander, if it's that, or if it's through CMC or greater, or just destroying a big threat. The second mode is a tax effect, non-creature spells. Your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. And the third one is a graveyard recursion effect for a planeswalker or a creature. In Bolus's Clutches is perfect for taking a threat to you or to your board and turning it on the enemy. If somebody's swinging at you with a giant 9/9 beater, you can just flash this in because it's legendary and take control of that 9/9 beater. Yoribest the Sea God, flash it in, create an 8/8 hexproof blocker. On its second mode, after your draw step, tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. It effectively prevents somebody from doing anything on their next turn aside from playing something, because only their lands untap. So if they have a bunch of mana rocks or a bunch of creatures, you can tap down a very threatening player and prevent them from advancing their strategy too much. And its final mode, gain control of target permanent and opponent controls and untap it, is very valuable in this deck because if somebody has a threat, we might want it. Now we have some more niche ways to protect our board. We have Jin Gitaxias, because he has free counter spells on our opponent's stuff. Whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This ability triggers only once each turn. It's amazing. If somebody is in an artifact or a spellslinger deck, they have to play around this. It also doubles our artifact, instant, or sorcery spells. The first one we do each turn. Hullbreaker Horror allows us to protect by bouncing threats or by returning spells off the stack into their owner's hand. Baird, Steward of Argive, makes an opponent pay mana to have to attack us or planeswalkers we control. It is Pillow Forting up while we can advance our board state. Sometimes the board has reached a point where you can't protect it anymore, and in those cases you just need to wipe it clean and try again. Board wipes we have include Urza's Ruinous Blast. It exiles all non-land legendary permanents. Nevinril's Disc is a threat, deterrent, and a board wipe. You can flash it in at instant speed with our commander in play, and then on our upkeep it will be untapped. So it's a threat because people don't want to continue advancing their board state knowing that we're going to just activate the disc and destroy everything. Cataclysmic Gearhulk allows you to keep some permanents, but it gives that opportunity to our enemies as well. It is also stapled on a creature. So if you don't have a creature in play and you need a board wipe, you get a creature in play with your board wipe. So it's situational, but it's very good still. Time Wipe does much the same as Cataclysmic Gearhulk, but denies your opponents from keeping their creatures. Now that we have board wiped, we might need something back from the graveyard, or we might need something back from the graveyard that our opponents have removed. For that, we have cards that return some key pieces of the deck to hand or to the battlefield. Teshar returns creatures when we play historic cards. They have to be mana value 3 or less, but it still returns them, and it returns them to the battlefield. Elspeth Conquers Death can return a creature or planeswalker to the battlefield, and it comes in with an extra counter on it. A +1 counter, +1/+1, or a loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker. Hannah Ship's Navigator, we have to pay 3 and tap her to return artifact or enchantment card from our graveyard to our hand, but we can continually do this, so she accrues value as well. We need to know how to win now that we have all this board control, recursion, mana, and ramping. So we can slowly grind the enemy out when we have big threats, like Traxos, Scourge of Krug. He untaps when we play historic spells, so we can always attack, then untap and have a blocker just by playing another historic spell. Blackblade makes commander damage a very viable option to win. We will always have lots of lands and can easily hit commander damage on at least one opponent. Blightsteel is an instant loss for someone if it connects during combat, and we can always flash this in on the end step before our turn if we have 12 mana available. And if it gets returned to the graveyard or milled into the graveyard, it protects us a little bit from being milled out because it returns to the library. At least for one turn, we'll be protected. So this is an more odd win con of Phyrexian Metamorph. It can become our opponent's win condition, or it can double down on one of our big threats like Blightsteel Colossus or Blackblade Reforged. It can also just be flashed in to duplicate the creature that's attacking us to provide a blocker. Extra turns is another way we can put our opponents out of their misery, because this deck will put them in misery. Continually smacking them with combat or controlling them more with our extra turn card draws and lands will definitely allow us to just continue winning more and controlling the game more, because we'll accrue more and more value with each extra turn we take. Most degenerate way to win with this deck, however, is with Planeswalkers, just continually outvaluing our table. Oath of Teferi means we can use our Planeswalkers twice per turn. Narset prevents our opponents from catching up by denying them extra cards per turn. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, allows us to draw extra cards, untap lands, and his ultimate allows us to exile opponents' permanents when we play lands. Teferi Time Raveler prevents opponents' instants from being cast on turns that aren't theirs. Master of Time can use abilities on every turn, providing draw, then discard, creature threat removal, and 2 extra turns if we manage to ult him. Teferi Who Slows the Sunset might be the most oppressive and most likely to make an enemy out of us, tapping opponents' permanents, untapping ours, gaining life, top of library manipulation, and untap and draw on each opponent's draw and untap steps. If we can ultimate him, we will outvalue and close the game out very shortly. We need some utility cards now. Lightning Greaves can help protect our commander or a big threat, or haste, depending on the scenario if we can't flash out our Blightsteel Colossus. Thran Temporal Gateway cheats historics into play for a cheaper cost if they cost more. So it's just 4 to tap it and put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Unlicensed Hearse is in the deck for removing threats from graveyards and becoming a combat threat after it is removed enough. Because when you tap it, exile 2 cards from a single graveyard, and then it gets more power for each card that it is exiled. Now that we have our deck figured out and the game plan of playing everything on our opponent's turns, we need to have lands to supply mana. Reliquary Tower is a utility land that gives us no max hand size. Pinamo allows untapping of legendary permanents, so we can attack and then use them as a blocker. Iganjo and Otawara are the channel lands from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and they can be discarded for the additional ability of, with Iganjo, deal 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. It costs less for each legendary creature we control. And Otawara, return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. It costs less for each legendary creature we control. We could use this to bounce a combo piece we need or a threat that we need on the board if we're being board wiped ourselves. Now we go to the real meat and potatoes of the land cards. Lands that tap for both of our colors, all with varying enter the battlefield tapped or untapped. Command Tower, Commander All-Star, it's in every deck that is 2 or more colors, or should be in every deck that is 2 or more colors. Prairie Stream enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more lands. Sea of Clouds enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Hallowed Fountain enters the battlefield, you pay 2 life. If you do, or it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped. As Port Town enters the battlefield, you may reveal a Plains or Islands card from your hand. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Glacial Fortress enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a Plains or Island. All of these cards tap for blue or white, and they are just perfect mana fixing. Fabled Passage, you can sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. If you control 4 or more lands, untap that land. Flooded Strand, tap it, pay 1 life, sacrifice it, search your library for a Plains or Island card, put it on the battlefield. This isn't restricted to basic land, which is why the value of it is so high. Hengegate Pathway, we can have it enter to where it taps for a white mana, or we can use the backside, have Seagate Pathway to where it taps for a blue. Nimbus Maze, it taps for a white if you control an island, it taps for a blue if you control a plains, or it can tap for generic. Irrigated Farmland, we can cycle it if we are confident enough in our lands, and we just need card draw. It does enter the battlefield tapped if you play it for a land. Azorius Chancery enters the battlefield tapped, and it bounces a land to your hand, but it does tap for 2, a white and a blue. After this, we have plenty of islands and plains to round out the deck. We have 8 of each. Well, thank you for watching this video today. I hope this inspired you to make a Raff Capashen deck and really just torture your friends. Remember to hit the like, subscribe, smash the bell, do all the YouTube stuff, and keep an eye out for the next video.